top teams from around the world and living legends in the sport already assembling on one stage. Now, you can really feel the excitement, too, of the fans in the house there, you know, for all of the teams, not just the hometown favorites, but those who have traveled across the world. And I think for me, particularly, what I love the most about this is looking at this tournament on paper, arguably the most competitive World Championship we've had to date going in.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned with the upper echelons of play, it's going to be very close. You can't say that one of these teams is miles above the other one, at least with the preparation beforehand. Once the games start, perhaps things change, but it's unlikely.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It was very easy, I feel, for me to predict the last two winners before the tournament even started. But this year, I think SK Telecom, but I am nowhere near as confident as I was in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, when we look at this, it's going to make our jobs very fun, right? When we parse through all this information, I know we all did our pick'ems. We'll see how those pan out throughout the tournament. But in general, just, you know, kind of the aura of curiosity that surrounds this tournament and this first day of play, which I think will be so telling on top of the fact that we haven't seen these teams in quite some time.
I'm just happy we're guaranteed to have very, very good games no matter what. This is like compared to last Worlds, it was like some games that were just, this is over, no matter what, you know?
Without a doubt, some good games ahead of us. Now, over the next 2 weeks, teams will be competing in a round-robin group stage where each team will face off against every other team in their group twice. The top two teams from each group will advance to the knockout stage in London, while the other two will go home. Now, let's start by taking a quick look at how the group draw played out. In Group A, we have the #1 seed from North America, Counterlogic Gaming, Korea's Coup Tigers, the LMS's Flash Wolves, and the international wildcard from Brazil's CB LOL Pain Gaming. Monty, thoughts on this group?
My thoughts on this group should be pretty easy for Coup Tigers to get out. I think CLG can come out of this group, too. Of course, I do have some lingering doubts because they didn't get that full boot camp in with Xmithy. But even then, the rest of the group relatively weaker. But it's going to be a tight race, I think, for #2, and one loss to Pain or one loss to the Flash Wolves really could just disrupt the entire balance.
Well, and Crumbzz, you spoke to the possibility that Pain could even find their way out of this group if things fall in the right places.
Well, I mean, there's chances of hail in Los Angeles as well, and many things could happen. But yes, there's obviously a possibility for Pain to do well. I'm hoping for it. You know, I want to root for the underdogs, the Latin American, South American team, I mean. And I want to see that happen, but it is, again, unlikely because of the strength of CLG.
Now, moving on to Group B, it's Europe's #1 seed Fnatic, the LPL's Invictus Gaming, the LMS's AHQ Esports Club, and Cloud9 of the North American LCS. Yamato, throwing this one to you.
I feel like the two favorites are very obvious, the Fnatic and Invictus Gaming. It's very hard for me to judge who's going to take the first seed, but this group with Cloud9 and AHQ in it, I think we could possibly see some upsets.
You don't think AHQ is making a run for the top two?
Like, I doubt it. I feel Invictus Gaming and Fnatic are the obvious favorites, but I'm expecting, like, with the fact that there's been such a huge time difference where we haven't seen LMS, I think there's a possibility they can bring up something fresh.
Well, especially IG, they're the team that I'm looking at because I feel that I know how strong EDG is and I know how strong LGD is, but IG is a team that has been so inconsistent that it's really hard to get a read on them. Kid and Kitties, they have to replicate their most recent performances if they want to do well, because they typically really haven't been that strong.
You know, I think the inconsistency comes from the actual play style that is pretty much stuck within the LPL, that all these teams kind of promote each other to play wild all the time, and I think that's one of the things that leads to it. And I don't think this tournament is really going to bring out that inconsistency out of IG, and they'll probably buckle down a lot better.
Let's jump over to Group C, which is going to include Korea's #1 seed, SK Telecom T1, the EU LCS's H2K, China's Edward Gaming, and the international wildcard representing the GPL, the Bangkok Titans. Crumbzz?
Well, I don't want to be that guy for H2K and Bangkok Titans, but it's really a shame, you know.
It's a grim picture.
Like, as soon as the groups were drawn, it's like, all right, well, guys, you know, let's make vacation plans in Europe. This group is going to be SKT and EDG getting out very clearly, and H2K and Bangkok will just have to use this as a learning opportunity and just try to have some fun out there.
Well, and while it's unfortunate for H2K and the Bangkok Titans, from my perspective, having EDG and SKT in the same group is fantastic because that means they'll go into the opposite side of the brackets when they make it out, and that increases our odds of having a really awesome final. So that's really exciting for me.
Be a sweet rematch.
Like, I was thinking the exact same thing. Like, I'm just hoping we get the EDG SKT final. This is just my dream.
We're set up for the storylines. We'll see if they fall in place. Well, finally, in Group D, it's China's #1 seed, LGD Gaming, Korea's KT Rolster, North America's Team Solo Mid, and the EU LCS's Origin. And although maybe not as lopsided as Group C, I personally feel here too as well, though the European and North American seeds are in a huge hole that they're about to have to climb out of in order to take down Goliaths like LGD and KT.
I think this is the team, the group that has the most fans behind it, because all these teams are pretty popular. Everybody really knows who these guys are and want to see their own region do very well. And we don't really know how well they're going to do, just because, at least personally, I take a lot of the information that the pros say is like, oh, these guys have been doing really well in scrims. I'm like, oh, maybe he said that. I mean, he knows something I don't, obviously. So I want to see.
I know you've got some thoughts on how scrims have been going.
I mean, my big question is KT, right? Sure, they looked good in the gauntlet, but in their 8-1 best-of-3 run in the second half of the summer season in Korea, it's impressive. They only lost to SK Telecom in best-of-3s. When we go back and we actually dig into those matches, they were losing to single games to some of the worst teams in Korea. So they need to get that consistency up. If KT gets rolling in the early game, if they start to get kills, they're unstoppable. If they start to fall behind, they don't play from behind very well. So the key for them is going to be that early aggression. And if people can replicate SK Telecom shutting down Score and Peekaboo, then I think there's a chance that KT doesn't make it out.
Now, if it's not KT, is it TSM or Origin?
Origin.
Okay.
For sure. I feel like in this group, even though there's two clear favorites, I feel like LGD and KT have shown inconsistency throughout the season. So I think it will be interesting to watch this group.
All right, maybe closer than I may have thought to begin with. Well, throughout the tournament, teams will be competing on patch 518, where a lot has changed since the last time we saw most of these teams play way back on 514. Most notably, gentlemen, we saw changes going towards the top lane.
Well, that top lane shift will affect the bottom lane even harder, because that means that the guys that can TP into the bot lane are going to be more powerful than they ever were. So you get a Darius TP into your bot lane and just triple kill everybody with the mid lane TP, and it's just going to be complete madness for everybody down here. I don't think the bot lane is really going to have a lot of fun playing here, so I think that they'll just constantly lane swap and really just avoid having to deal with teleports, because it is going to be a pain in the ass, especially if you have to deal with dragons as well from Mordekaiser.
Something else that has gone through a lot of changes is also the mid lane, because throughout the season we've had only Victor and Azzi going around, but these two champions have been nerfed, and a lot of assassins have been buffed, and I think that's going to have a massive impact on Worlds as well.
Well, just the number of mid laners you can run with teleport right now. If you don't lane swap, games are just going to turn into 5v5s very early on in the bottom lane, because there's a whole swath of champions that can run TP out of the mid lane. So I mean, expect some pretty wild skirmishes very early in the game.
All of this in mind, when we look at the 16 teams that are going to be here on the world stage, how does all of these changes to the game affect the landscape of League of Legends as we'll see it play out over the next few weeks?
Gosh, I don't think anybody knows, really. I don't think anybody... I mean, these changes were so massive. We can sit here, we can have ideas of what's going to be played. Obviously, Mordekaiser's quite strong. Gangplank and Lulu, because of their nature, being able to be played in both the top and mid lane should be very high priority picks and bans, but I have no clue.
I think a cool thing, too, is the itemizations. Like, all the other tournaments, you can kind of expect, okay, this guy's going to build this, now this item follows up. Now you can build pretty much anything you want. We've seen crazy builds even in the earlier patches, and now that 518 has arrived, there's so many new items and different paths and itemizations with crazy champions that we've never seen before. So it's another thing to keep track on, be like, oh, take some notes down, this is what's good.
Well, we have no clue. Maybe you at home have a clue. So we're going to look to you in the Twitter sphere. Hit us up at LOL Esports and tell us which player and lane will have the biggest impact on 518 and why. Be sure to hashtag Worlds so we can talk over some of your answers on the desk later today. Now, before we head back inside the venue for Game 1, let's check out what we have on the docket with today's schedule. Kicking off the tournament are the hometown favorites, Europe's #1 seed Fnatic versus China's Invictus Gaming. Then Cloud9 will take on AHQ Esports. After that, we'll move over to Group C for a grudge match between the two Zeds, SK Telecom versus H2K, and we'll conclude day 1 in Group A with Brazil's Pain Gaming versus the Coup Tigers. Now let's get your predictions, gentlemen. 2015 World Championship, Game 1, Fnatic versus Invictus Gaming. Crumbzz, we're starting
Fnatic,
with you.
baby. It's gotta be. These are the guys. I'm hoping these guys can take it somewhere. You know, I'm putting in a little a little extra love instead of analysis into this. I want them to do well. I want to see a Western team. And the shame that happens is that throughout the entire season, there's always NA versus EU. And then when it happens that the EU team is better, all the people from NA are just like, yeah, we'll cheer for EU now. So
you got to get behind those Western teams at Worlds, Monty.
You may be surprised, but with equal numbers of Korean players on both of these teams, I actually, I can't just go by my default of who has more Koreans. So it's definitely going to be Fnatic for me as well. I think this team is going to be very, very sharp coming in here. They really buckled down in their boot camp in Korea, I know. And they obviously had a great season in Europe, and they will be a major threat here. I also just think they're more consistent than IG. And I think that Yellowstar and Reckless is a very favorable matchup for Kid and Kitties. For me, it depends on, can Forbidden stay alive in that mid lane? Because that synergy between Kakao and Rookie is extraordinary.
So it's not just a math equation this time. There is thought behind it. Next up, Yamato.
Well, of course, I'm going to go for Fnatic as well, simply because I like to go for the solid choice. I feel like at this point, IG is like rolling a dice, and but IG doesn't have a 6. That's the problem,
All right, well, there you have it. The desk is in unison for Game 1 of the 2015 World Championships. We're going to have to mix things up later in the show, gentlemen, get it more exciting. Well, without further ado,